What if the one food already sitting in your refrigerator, costing less than $1 and a staple of human breakfast for thousands of years, is either quietly helping you manage your blood sugar or silently making it worse? And here's the surprising part. It's not about whether you eat eggs. It's about the very specific decisions you make around them. Decisions so small, so easy to overlook, that most people with diabetes never even consider them. Yet those tiny choices can mean the difference between a fasting blood sugar of 165 in the morning and one of 130 every single day. I'm Dr. John Anderson, and I've spent years working at the intersection of nutrition science, aging, and metabolic health, specifically for adults over 50 who are managing diabetes and striving to live with real energy, clarity, and control over their numbers. Today, I want to have an honest, no-nonsense conversation with you about eggs. Not the version filled with old myths and outdated fears, but the one backed by current science, and more importantly, by real outcomes I've seen in real people. And I want to warn you right now, stay with me until the end, because I'm going to share a concept about egg timing that almost no one talks about. It's tied to your body's natural morning hormone cycle, and once you understand it, the way you approach breakfast will never be the same. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments. I read everyone, and it truly helps me connect with this community. Now let's start at the very beginning, because I've found that most confusion about eggs and diabetes stems from one massive misunderstanding about how the diabetic body actually works. Here's the truth that often gets overlooked. When you have type 2 diabetes, your body's first problem isn't necessarily that it can't produce enough insulin. In fact, many people with type 2 diabetes produce a normal amount, or even more than normal. The deeper issue is that the cells in your muscles, liver, and fat tissue have become resistant to the insulin signal. Your body is shouting the message, but the cells have turned down the volume. They've gone partially deaf. Now, why does this matter for eggs? Because what you eat for breakfast, specifically how much protein you pair with carbohydrates, has a direct and measurable effect on how sensitive your cells remain to insulin for the rest of the day. Here's what the research consistently shows. Eating high-quality protein in the morning helps reduce what scientists call the postprandial glucose spike, that sharp rise in blood sugar after a meal. Protein does this in two powerful ways. First, it slows gastric emptying, meaning food leaves your stomach more slowly, and sugar enters your bloodstream more gradually, like a slow, controlled drip rather than a sudden flood. Second, certain amino acids in protein, particularly leucine, which eggs are rich in, actually stimulate the pancreas to release insulin in a more timely and proportionate way. In other words, protein helps your insulin response become more precise rather than chaotic. 2 large eggs contain approximately 12 to 13 grams of complete high-quality protein. Complete means it contains all 9 essential amino acids your body can't manufacture on its own. And here's what makes eggs especially remarkable. Their glycemic index is essentially 0. They do not raise blood sugar by themselves, not by a single point. But, and this is important, that 0 only stays at 0 if you handle them correctly. The moment you start frying them in butter, stacking them on white toast, or pairing them with sweetened juice, that protective power begins to erode. Not because the egg changed, but because what surrounds it changed. Now let me address the elephant in the room. Cholesterol, because I know what some of you are thinking. You were probably told by a doctor, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, that eggs raise your cholesterol and are dangerous for your heart. And if you're living with diabetes, which already increases cardiovascular risk, you took that advice seriously. You gave up eggs, you switched to oatmeal and fruit. You thought you were making the safer choice. Here's what the science now tells us, and I want you to hear this clearly. For the vast majority of healthy adults, including most people with type 2 diabetes, dietary cholesterol, the cholesterol you eat in foods like eggs, has a minimal effect on your blood cholesterol levels. The bigger drivers of harmful LDL cholesterol are refined carbohydrates, added sugars, and trans fats, not eggs. In fact, research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that whole egg consumption improved what scientists call cholesterol efflux capacity. That is the ability of your HDL, your good cholesterol, to actually remove harmful cholesterol from your artery walls and carry it out of your body. And a 2025 randomized controlled trial from the same journal found that when 2 eggs per day were eaten as part of a diet low in saturated fat, LDL cholesterol actually decreased compared to a high saturated fat diet without eggs. What does that tell us? Something very important. The problem was never the egg sitting in your refrigerator. The problem was what we were cooking it in and what we were eating alongside it. In plain English, the egg you gave up might have been your friend all along. Before we begin, take a second and tell me your name and where you're tuning in from. I go through the comments and I genuinely want to know who I'm speaking to and supporting here. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Mary because her story illustrates this perfectly. Mary came to me at 71 years old. She'd been managing type 2 diabetes for nearly a decade. She was sharp, disciplined, and deeply committed to doing everything right. But her A1C had been stubbornly sitting at 8.0% for 2 years, and her fasting blood sugar rarely dipped below 158 in the mornings, despite her medications. When I asked her to walk me through her daily routine, she described it with quiet pride. She woke up at 6:30, took her medication, and made herself what she called a heart-healthy breakfast: steel-cut oatmeal with a tablespoon of honey and half a cup of blueberries, a glass of cranberry juice she'd bought from the health food store because it said no added sugar on the label, and sometimes a small whole wheat muffin she baked herself. Now Mary had done her homework. She genuinely believed this was a responsible, diabetes-friendly breakfast, and I had to tread carefully here because I didn't want to dismiss the effort she'd put in. I asked her to do something for me. Use her glucometer to check her blood sugar at exactly 45 minutes after breakfast, then again at 90 minutes. She came back the following week with her log. At 45 minutes, 214. At 90 minutes, 198. Every single morning, that breakfast was launching her blood sugar past 200. The oatmeal, even the steel-cut variety, was breaking down into glucose quickly in the absence of protein. The honey was adding pure, simple sugar. The no-added sugar cranberry juice still contained 24 grams of naturally occurring sugar per cup, with zero fiber to slow it down. And the whole wheat muffin, despite its wholesome reputation, was delivering another rapid carbohydrate load. Her body was working overtime every morning before 8 a.m. Here's what I proposed. No dramatic overhaul, no long food list, just one foundational shift. Replace the oatmeal and juice breakfast with 2 eggs cooked without oil. I'll explain that in a moment. Paired with half an avocado and a generous handful of sautéed spinach or sliced tomatoes. That was it. Same medications, same walks, same everything else. 3 weeks later, Mary came back in. She pulled out her glucometer log without me even asking. Her 45-minute post-meal reading was now averaging 138. Her 90-minute reading was averaging 124. She looked at me across the desk and said, "Dr. John Anderson, I feel like someone finally turned on a light in a room I've been trying to navigate in the dark for 10 years. After 4 months, her fasting blood sugar had dropped to an average of 131. Her A1C came down to 7.3%. Her total cholesterol actually improved. And she told me she had more energy after breakfast than she'd had in years, because she wasn't riding that blood sugar roller coaster every morning, crashing hard by 10:30 and desperately hunting for a snack. That is the power we're talking about. And the solution was always in her refrigerator. All right, now we get to the part I know you've been waiting for, the practical how. Because here's something I tell every patient. Knowing that eggs are beneficial is step one. But how you prepare and pair them determines whether you actually experience that benefit. Let me walk you through this methodically. First, how to cook them. The gold standard for blood sugar management is eggs cooked without added fat. I know that sounds counterintuitive because we've always associated eggs with butter or oil in the pan. But here's the thing. Egg yolks already contain their own natural fat. In a non-stick pan over medium heat, 2 beaten eggs will cook beautifully in about 2 to 3 minutes with zero added oil. The result? Creamy, soft scrambled eggs with nothing to complicate the metabolic picture. Boiled eggs are equally excellent. and I actually recommend them for people who want convenience. You can hard boil a batch of 6 on Sunday night. They keep perfectly in the refrigerator for 5 to 7 days. Peel 1 or 2 in the morning, pair them with your vegetables and avocado, and your entire breakfast takes 4 minutes. No excuses, no shortcuts that compromise your health. Poached eggs are wonderful too, though they require a bit more practice. No oil whatsoever, just water with a small splash of vinegar to help the white hold together. What you want to avoid is frying eggs, even with a small amount of oil or butter at high heat. Some of you might be thinking, but I use olive oil, isn't that healthy? And olive oil is a wonderful food, but here's the nuance. Olive oil's benefits are greatest when consumed cold or at low temperatures. When you heat it to the temperatures needed for frying, you're diminishing those benefits and adding a significant caloric and fat load that, in the context of diabetes, can temporarily worsen insulin resistance at the cellular level. Save your olive oil for salads and drizzling on vegetables. Second, what to pair them with. This is where the real magic happens, or where people unknowingly undo all the good the egg was doing. Avocado is the single best companion for eggs in a diabetes-conscious breakfast. The monounsaturated fats in avocado, the same healthy fats as in olive oil, slow digestion and reduce the glycemic impact of anything else you're eating. They also support heart health, which matters enormously for people with diabetes. Half a ripe avocado alongside 2 eggs is a combination that's filling, nutritious, and genuinely stabilizing for blood sugar. Spinach is your next best friend, and I want to give you a specific reason. Spinach is one of the richest dietary sources of magnesium. Studies have consistently found that people with type 2 diabetes tend to have lower magnesium levels than people without diabetes, and low magnesium is directly associated with poor insulin sensitivity. Eating spinach regularly, especially with a protein-rich meal, is one of the simplest ways to address that gap. Tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, mushrooms, all excellent additions. They're low in carbohydrates, high in fiber, and they increase the volume and nutrition of your meal without pushing your blood sugar up. What you don't want to pair with your eggs: white bread, flour tortillas, sweet biscuits, hash browns, sugary ketchup, orange juice, and processed deli meats like bacon or sausage. These pairings are so common at breakfast that many people don't even think of them as choices. They just feel like what goes with eggs. But every one of those additions either spikes blood sugar directly or adds inflammation-promoting saturated fat and sodium that works against you. If you're still here with me and finding this helpful, take a moment to type 2 in the comments. It lets me know you're watching and getting value from this. Third, the one change that makes the biggest difference but nobody talks about. I promised you earlier that I'd share something about egg timing and your body's morning hormone cycle. Here it is. There's a phenomenon called the dawn phenomenon, and if you monitor your blood sugar, there's a chance you've noticed it without knowing what it was called. It works like this. In the hours just before you wake up, your body releases a wave of hormones: cortisol, glucagon, growth hormone, as part of its natural preparation to get you out of bed and functioning. One of the effects of these hormones is that your liver starts releasing stored glucose into your bloodstream, raising your blood sugar even before you've eaten a single thing. For people without diabetes, the body simply produces a little more insulin and handles it quietly. For people with type 2 diabetes, that early morning glucose release can push fasting blood sugars significantly higher than they were at midnight. Now, here's the critical connection to eggs. What you eat for breakfast either amplifies or dampens this morning cortisol-glucose cycle for the rest of the day. A high-carbohydrate breakfast essentially layers another glucose load on top of the one your liver already delivered. A high-protein breakfast, eggs being the star, sends a calming signal to your metabolic system. It feeds your muscles without triggering additional insulin surges, and it dampens the inflammatory response that cortisol can trigger. The practical implication? Eat your eggs within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up. Don't let that morning cortisol window run unchecked. Give your body protein early, and your blood sugar curve for the rest of the day will be measurably flatter. If this is helping you understand your body in a new way, make sure you subscribe and join us. I share simple science-backed habits like this every week to help you stay in control of your health. I want to tell you about a gentleman named Robert, 66 years old, a retired school principal who came to me with what he called stubborn morning numbers. His fasting blood sugar was consistently between 145 and 165, despite reasonably good daytime control. Robert was already eating eggs for breakfast. Good for him. But his dinner every night was a heavy carbohydrate meal: rice, pasta, or bread with whatever protein his wife cooked. And around 9 p.m., he'd often have a small bowl of cereal because he was slightly hungry before bed. I introduced him to what I call the evening egg strategy, and I want to share it with you because it addresses exactly that fasting morning number. When you eat a significant carbohydrate load in the evening, your liver has an abundance of glucose to work with overnight, and it tends to over-release stored glucose in the early morning hours. But when you replace that evening carbohydrate load with a protein-centered meal, particularly eggs, your liver's overnight behavior changes. It has less glucose to work with, so its early morning release is more measured and controlled. I asked Robert to try this 3 nights a week. Replace his usual evening carbohydrate-heavy meal with a 2-egg omelet packed with vegetables, spinach, peppers, mushrooms, whatever he had, accompanied by a small green salad with olive oil and vinegar. No bread, no rice, just eggs and vegetables. 3 nights per week. That was all. After 3 weeks, his average fasting blood sugar had dropped from 158 to 137. He was stunned. His primary care physician, at his next appointment, looked at his home glucose log and asked what medication he'd changed. Robert told him, "I started eating eggs for dinner 3 times a week." The doctor actually laughed, not unkindly, but with genuine surprise, because we are simply not taught to think of food as having that kind of targeted, measurable impact. But it does. Now, an important point I want to make clearly, because I take this seriously. If you are on insulin therapy, a significant change like adding high-protein meals in the evening can affect how your insulin works overnight. Please, before you make dietary changes this significant, have a conversation with your doctor or endocrinologist. Tell them what you're planning. Ask them if any dose adjustments might be needed. Good communication with your healthcare team isn't optional. It's part of the strategy. Let me quickly pull together the most common mistakes I see people with diabetes make around eggs, because avoiding these alone will move the needle on your numbers. Mistake 1. Cooking in oil or butter. The egg has its own fat. Cook it dry in a non-stick pan or boil it. Simple. Mistake 2. Pairing with refined carbohydrates. White toast, corn tortillas, biscuits. These undo the protein benefit almost immediately. If you want something alongside your eggs, choose half a slice of true dense whole grain bread with visible seeds, eaten after the eggs, not before. Mistake 3. Drinking juice alongside. Even fresh squeezed 100% natural orange juice delivers a significant glucose hit with no fiber. Eat the whole fruit if you want the vitamin C. Don't drink the juice. Mistake 4. Throwing away the yolk. The yolk contains choline for liver health, vitamin D for insulin sensitivity, lutein and zeaxanthin for eye protection, and B vitamins for nerve function. People with diabetes need every single one of those nutrients. Eat the whole egg. And if you've made it this far and you're getting value from this, type the number 4 in the comments. It's a simple way to let me know you're here and following along. Mistake 5. Eating eggs too late in the morning. Remember the dawn phenomenon. Get protein into your system within 30 to 60 minutes of waking to dampen that early cortisol glucose surge. Here's your simple, ready-to-use plan starting tomorrow morning. Wake up. Within 30 to 60 minutes, prepare 2 eggs, scrambled without oil or hard-boiled from the batch you made the night before. Pair them with half an avocado and a generous portion of any non-starchy vegetable: spinach, tomatoes, peppers, or mushrooms. Drink water or unsweetened herbal tea. Eat the eggs and vegetables first. If you need a small piece of whole grain bread, eat it last. That's it. Nothing exotic, nothing expensive, nothing that requires a special trip to a health food store. If you want a mid-morning snack, A single hard-boiled egg with a small handful of walnuts or almonds is your most blood sugar stable option. It'll hold you through to lunch without a crash. I want to close with something Mary said to me at her 6-month follow-up appointment. I asked her how she felt about the change she'd made, not just the numbers, but how she felt waking up in the morning. She thought about it for a moment and said, "For the first time in years, I'm not afraid of my breakfast. I used to dread checking my blood sugar after I ate because I always knew it was going to be high, and I never understood why when I was trying so hard. Now I check it, and I feel proud, not of the food, but of the fact that I finally have the right information." That sentence stayed with me because that's what this is really about. It's not about eggs. It's about giving you back a sense of agency over your own health. It's about replacing fear with knowledge and replacing frustration with a strategy that actually works. Your body is not your enemy. It's been doing its best with the signals it's been given. When you give it better signals, the right protein at the right time, paired with the right foods, it responds sometimes faster than you'd ever expect. Start tomorrow morning. 2 eggs cooked without oil, half an avocado, a generous pile of vegetables. Eat within an hour of waking up, then come back here next week and tell me in the comments what your numbers looked like. If this video gave you something real today, a new angle, a new idea, one thing you didn't know before, please give it a like. It takes 1 second, and it tells me this kind of content is worth making more of, and share it. If you know someone, a spouse, a sibling, a friend, who's struggling with their blood sugar and feels like they've tried everything, please send them this video, because sometimes all it takes is one piece of information arriving at the right moment to change everything. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice and does not replace the guidance of your personal physician or healthcare team. Always consult your doctor before making changes to your diet, especially if you are taking medication for diabetes or any other condition. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. You deserve it.